Next, I'd like to introduce our next in-conversation discussion, which is going to be moderated by Clifton Leaf, who was the editor-in-chief for Fortune. Prior to his role, he was deputy editor for the previous 3 years. He is an award-winning leader, author, and journalist for his efforts around anti-cancer. So please welcome Clifton. Thank you. And how many of us in here are representing companies that have something to do with healthcare? If you can make some noise. Perfect. All right, so joining Cliff to discuss the impact of diversity on a company's talent and culture and explain how it improves patient care is Bernard J. Tyson, who is chairman and CEO of Kaiser Permanente, one of America's leading healthcare providers and not-for-profit health plans. With operating revenue of over $73 billion, Kaiser Permanente serves 12.2 million members in 8 states and the District of Columbia. During his Kaiser Permanente career, Tyson has successfully managed all major aspects of the organization, serving in roles from hospital administrator to division president to president and chief operating officer. Under Tyson's leadership, Kaiser Permanente continues to focus on providing access to high quality and affordable healthcare and improving the health of its members and communities. Modern Healthcare has named him one of the most influential healthcare executives for 5 consecutive years. In April of 2017, he was included on Time's 100 list of the most influential people in the world and was named among the Time Healthcare Top 50 in October of 2018. And Great Place to Work just honored Kaiser Permanente on our best big companies to work for in its inaugural year, which is 2019. These are for organizations that have over 100,000 employees. So please help me welcome Bernard.
See you, my friend.
You too. So,
I'm still pumped up from the Michael Bush thing before. How many of you are all still pumped up from it? It's incredible because right afterwards I looked in the mirror and I saw Training Day Denzel. That's what. Does anyone else see that? Am I the only one?
But we agreed we were going to do the moonwalk.
We were going to do right, exactly. You are a passionate champion of diversity and inclusion. A lot of people, including many of the folks in this room, get diversity right. They know how to bring in different faces, voices, backgrounds. Inclusion is a lot tougher. Tell me a little bit about what that difference is and how you make it work.
Oh, sure. It's both how to make it work and how to continue to work at it, right? Because it's not a magical solution and it just happens. But I guess I came to understand later that there really is a difference between diversity and inclusion. And sometimes we just combine the two as if the assumption is that if you have the diversity, you automatically get the inclusion. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at many of our organizations historically, when we were focused, rightfully so, on diversity, it was, for the sake of this discussion, a number count, right? So do we have, do we have African Americans? Do we have women? Do we have, and it was more of a number count. But what would happen is you would maybe get the number count, but the dominant culture has already decided what the environment is going to feel like, operate, and you have to assimilate, right? And you have to become one. And so if you stop and think about that transition, it's sort of like you leave your real self outside and you come in and you figure out how to get along to be a part of. And then when you finally really step back and look at the reality of that, most people come to terms with, I'm not being my true self, right? My 100% Bernard. And so we work very hard on the inclusiveness, which is you have a right to be at the table. You have a right to be who you are. You have a right to think the way you think. And the objective here is to celebrate diversity and get all the different perspectives and walks of lives and different ways of looking at issues and challenges, because we're all working towards the same endpoint, which is the mission of the organization.
So when you say you work really hard at it, I think this is the part that's so challenging for a lot of folks is like, how do you train leaders at every level in encouraging this kind of be yourselfness?
Yes, and part of my job as the CEO is to really work hard at creating the right environment. And so in Kaiser Permanente, I feel strongly that we need to encourage and celebrate a speak up environment, which I would argue is the most powerful tool for getting people to be who they are, is to create an environment where you can share your point of view. I have a view, you have a view.
Right.
I symbolize that by having an American flag in my boardroom, in my office, and in my conference room. And I talk to people all the time when they come into my office that we live in a great country and you have freedom of speech and you get to say what you want to say. Now, you may have to deal with the consequences of some of the things that you say, but you get to say what you want to say. And so you should not give up your freedom when you come into my office.
So it must get loud though, because if everyone's speaking up and you have an unusually large organization, 200,000 plus employees, as was mentioned in 8 states in the District of Columbia. That's a very big organization. There aren't a lot of really giant organizations on the 100 best companies to work for list, and that's because it's a challenge. It's a whole different set of challenges.
Right.
So encouraging that kind of speaking up in a larger organization, it must present its own set of challenges.
Oh yes, yeah. But it's a beautiful thing. At least to me, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But I had to clarify though, because what was happening in the beginning, I started out by saying I want everybody to speak up. You in America, this is a beautiful place. No matter what people might say, it's still a great place, and you get to speak up. And so people started speaking up, and then I started to get some feedback that some people were speaking up, telling their bosses, supervisors, no, I don't think I want to do that.
Did they use that language, or did they use different language? Yeah.
And then the person would say, no, but you need to do it, right? We need to get this done.
Right.
There we go. Well, Bernard said we could speak up.
Right. It's a challenge. Yeah.
So I had to add to the speak up, right?
Yeah. Speak up and listen.
So we have 3 things. Yeah. We have the duty to speak up and speak out, right? We have the duty to listen. And then there's always a decision maker in that context. And so when the decision is made, you then have a duty to line up and make the decision possible. So that's the 3-point plan.
I'm not going to name companies, but recently there was a very big technology company in California in which they also had a speak up culture, or have one. And one of those employees said something really offensive and felt like it was his right to say it. You have a strong point of view about the value of your company and the alignment of the values of people who work for that company. I mean, it's challenging, obviously, especially in a partisan age, in an age where people feel very strongly about different kinds of ideals, to have a holistic organization. But you actually think that the Kaiser Permanente values should thrive in this case.
Oh, absolutely. It's a speak up culture in the 21st century with social media and everything has a set of complexities to it, and you're touching on one of them. When the value systems of an individual or individuals contradicts the value systems of the organization, how do you address that in a speak up environment? And we've had issues. That's
so much better than I did.
Yeah, we've had issues that we have to deal with, and at the same time, as I said earlier, you want to speak up environment, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't issues or consequences that have to be dealt with in the context of
Right.
what we stand for as an organization, while we respect the rights of individuals.
Right.
And this comes up quite a bit with social media. I think the second thing that is very relevant is that people bring issues into the organization that's happening on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And I get tweets and I get memos all the time saying, why don't you speak up on this issue, Bernard, as our leader? And that's the other phenomenon that is happening inside of our organization and across the country.
You did that famously after, I think it was Trayvon Martin? Yeah.
Michael Brown.
Michael Brown.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's so many issues, and I know that many of the leaders in this company feel that pressure as well. How do you pick and choose what to speak out on?
It's work in progress, no question about it, because that is one of the challenges.
Right.
When I did the Michael Brown LinkedIn article, it was really intended for me to contribute to the discussion and to offer a perspective. I think we all remember what happened to Michael Brown, unfortunately, and I saw the narrative in the country change from, you know, just how awful it was for anyone to be shot down and left, and obviously go through that whole process, to a narrative of what he was doing beforehand and getting away from the heart of the issue. And I thought that I can contribute by talking in real terms about a person who happens to be African American, who was the CEO of a, at the time, $65 billion company, and how I'm treated in the C-suite versus how I'm treated on the street. And so I gave that contradiction with factual information of a day in the life of Bernard Tyson on the streets of America.
It's a powerful piece, and everyone should read it. You know, we talk a lot about values. There's also something called mission. And one of the things that really sets KP apart is a sense of mission. You've talked about the fact that you have, obviously, 12.2 million customers.
12.3.
Oh, 12.3. 12.3 million customers.
You can round up to 13.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that. But you serve in the communities that you serve. There are close to 70 million people. It's about a fifth of the country, and you said that KP really needs to be a partner in the community. You've done that through addressing homelessness, mental health, food security. Talk a little bit about why mission is so important in creating a great place to work.
Yeah, great question. You know, the mission gives us purpose. The mission really helps to define why we are here and what's the significance of us being, in our case, who we are at Kaiser Permanente. I've been inside of Kaiser Permanente for over 30 years. And the mission still inspires me. We've not achieved the full potential of the mission. But when I look at, for example, what you just said, and we call this our 1366 strategy. We take care of 13 million people, rounding up.
Okay, round up.
And there are 66 million who lives in the communities around us. So that's our line of sight. On the homeless issue, it's a combination of the connection of not having a house or a home or a shelter and the impact on health. So we connect everything to health. We also just, you know, think in terms of the higher calling in the 21st century, in the most wealthiest country on earth. The idea that we as a society would accept anyone going to bed at night on the streets of America as their bed is unacceptable. And so that's the ethical ground on which we stand. And then beyond that, we believe strongly that if you're going to have a healthy community, if you're going to have a healthy family, it starts with having a shelter, a place to go and to call home. And that's our connection of how do we deal with homelessness and affordability.
So you say our and we. How do employees react to this? How do they respond to this? Are they engaging you in the mission and saying, hey, Bernard, I love that we do this. We should be doing this because this is an extension of our mission?
Fully engaged. Fully engaged. We're working on what we call the shared agenda inside of Kaiser Permanente. It's a shared agenda between Kaiser Permanente and America, and the homelessness is one of them. Mm-hmm. Working on the mind is another one. Mm-hmm. We're about to roll out 3 bold ideas that came from within the employee base and physician base of Kaiser Permanente. And it's focused on what we call bold moves. And one of them is, how do we want to deal with the mind? And we want to focus on issues of adverse childhood experiences mm-hmm. that are traumatic, that affects a child that then becomes an adult, and that person is dealing with that issue, mm-hmm. in some cases for his or her life, right? So now we're working on how do we affect that early on and help to prevent that and educate families about how to address that so the person is not dealing with that for the rest of their lives.
You have been incredibly eloquent on the need or on the failure of the healthcare system to separate the head from the body, as you put it, and the need to integrate that in our healthcare system. Kaiser Permanente does that. This is an issue in workplaces around the country and around the world, is the separation of the head and the body. And many people, and Michael Bush spoke passionately earlier about this need to be inclusive on people with mental disabilities, mental health challenges, and their family members. But this remains one of those areas that is a challenging one for workplaces and communities. How do we change that conversation?
Well, you know, a lot of it, very pertinent to why we're here, mm-hmm. is how to create an environment where you are constantly thinking about the health and well-being mm-hmm. of your employees and everyone who interacts with your organization, such as what we try to do inside of Kaiser Permanente. The fact of the matter is, I can guarantee you, if I asked a question in this audience, which maybe I should, how many of you have someone in your family, your neighbor, your coworker, or maybe even yourself that you know for a fact that they're dealing with some form of a mental illness or challenge? Let me see how many hands are. I mean, this happens everywhere, right? Yeah. It's a common issue. And unfortunately, the way we have handled mental health in our country, and now I've learned globally, is we've created this negative stigma around it. And so people don't want to talk about it, and you don't want to address it. It's a very complicated issue when you're dealing with a loved one or you are dealing with a mental challenge, and the stigma doesn't help at all. Then we designed a health system in which is probably the only organ in the body that we sort of set it aside. And so if you have a mental health challenge, you have a separate record and you go over there to get care and nurturing and what else is needed. And we've been working on, one, destigmatizing it, and number two, trying to create the integrated system approach about how do you begin to treat mental health like we do every other organ and disease that we deal with, and really to integrate it into the overall practice of care inside of Kaiser Permanente. Mm-hmm.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time.
Already?
On your long list of accolades, you forgot one, which is that you, Bernard Tyson, are one of Fortune's world's greatest leaders. So thank you, and thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.